This is Hidden Ones Part 27, and we will be talking about the Spanish Inquisition briefly. I'm going to tell you right off bat, you do your own due diligence and don't just take my word for it. Remember in Part 26 when I talked about the Songhai Empire and I mentioned something about 1492? I'm going to say this right off gate. Fair use, fair use. This is for educational purposes. With the rise of the Assyrian dynasty, the Sassanid dynasty of the Black Hebrew kings was terminated about the year 1492. The expulsion of the Jews from Spain and Portugal. Anytime you hear me say Jews, I'm referring to the descendants of Jacob's 12 sons who are Yasharel. Okay? I'm not going to get into how the Hebrews got over into Spain and Portugal because I already talked about it. It was AD 1492, January 2nd, when the Moorish stronghold of Grenada surrendered to the armies of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Now, I will say this. The Hebrews dealt with Mali. After dealing with Mali, they had to deal with the Moors, who oppressed them as well. All right, so again, I'm going to say that again. After dealing with Mali, okay, they had to then deal with the Moors. Now, if you get the book From Babylon to Timbuktu, everything is in that book. He goes into the Moors, but I'm not going to get into that because the video is going to be way too long. It was AD 1492, January 2nd, when the Moorish stronghold of Grenada surrendered to the armies of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Now, the King and Queen Isabella were self-professing Christians. I'm going to say that again. The King and the Queen Isabella were self-professing Christians. I want you to keep that in mind. For the first time since the year 711, all of Spain was in Christian hands. The decree to expel the Yahudim, the Jews, from Spain was signed on March 31st in one of the corridors of the Great Alhambra, the palace of the Moorish kings of Grenada. The reason given for the expulsion of the Jews was that it was thought they corrupted the Marranos. Now, the Marranos were Hebrews that converted to Christianity. I'm going to say that again. The Marranos were Hebrews that converted to Christianity, really not by choice. They converted to try to escape persecution. They still lived the way they lived, but they converted to escape persecution. So there was a group of Hebrews that practiced their customs, and there was another group of Hebrews that converted to Christianity to escape persecution. So the reason given for the expulsion of the Jews was that it was thought they corrupted the Marranos. Jews converted to Christianity by privately encouraging them in disloyalty to Christianity. The ultimatum given to the Jews expired August 1st, 1492, but the last group of Jews did not leave until August 2nd, 1492. So you had quite a few things happen, and supposedly Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, and I'm not going to even get into that because that's a whole nother subject. The date is of strange coincidence. That day was the 9th of Ab, the fast day, which is reminiscent of the destruction of the first and second temples. Let me say that again. This date is of a strange coincidence. That day was the 9th of Ab, the fast day, which is reminiscent of the destruction of the first and second temples. Professor Alan H. Gabi, remember, we took a look at his map, says that the reign of the last Jewish king of Ghana terminated in 1492. In order to satisfy Queen Isabella of Spain, King Manuel of Portugal promulgated a royal decree expelling the Jews and Moors from his country in 1496. The Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal were scattered throughout the Mediterranean coast. It is estimated that over 100,000 Jews departed from Spain and Portugal during the persecutions and the expulsion. Some of the Jews went to Northern Europe, Italy, and Turkey. Let me say that again. Some of these Yahudim went to Northern Europe, Italy, and Turkey. Now, this is not something you hear every day, but most of them went to Muslim countries of Northern and Western Africa, went to Muslim countries of Northern and Western Africa. So when they fled from Spain and Portugal, they went where? To West Africa. All right. So they were in West Africa when the transatlantic slave trade began. These black Jews would naturally go to African countries most of all because of less persecution, and they could disguise themselves easily among blacks. Remember I said the Hamites looked like the Shemites and the Shemites looked like the Hamites. R.H.M. Ellis gives a graphic description of the Portuguese Jew. I want you to listen to that. Barak, I'm going to say S. So Barak S, middle-sized, good features, skin somewhat black, black curly hair, long eyebrows of the same color, so that one might know by his looks that he was a descendant from the Portuguese Jews. Now, he just gave you a description of what the Portuguese Jews look like. When the Jews were expelled from Spain, about 100,000 entered Portugal. They were permitted to enter under the condition that they pay the poll tax, with the understanding that they would leave the country within 8 months. Also, at this time, the king obligated himself to take the Jews wherever they desired at the termination of the 8 months. When the time expired, many Jews were stranded because the king did not provide enough ships in time. All the black Jews who were left behind were deprived of their freedom and sold into slavery. During the reign of King John II, 700 black Hebrew children were ruthlessly taken away from their parents in Portugal and transported to the island of San Tome, off the west coast of Africa. If we go back to the 1747 map of Negroland, I will put this on the screen for you to see. San Tome is just below the Kingdom of Judah. And when you look at the Kingdom of Judah, you will see Slave Coast. So it is undeniable that they took Hebrews into the slave trade. You do your own due diligence and don't just take my word for it. This island is located near Nigeria. We're talking about San Tome, Cameroon, and Gabon. Alan H. Gabi says that the Portuguese founded the island of San Tome in 1471. Portuguese founded the island of San Tome in 1471. In the year 1484, King John II of Portugal, who reigned from 1481 to 1495, offered the Jews of his kingdom the choice of baptism or settling at San Tome. Let me make it plain. So he gave them a choice. Either you get baptized or you go into slavery at San Tome. Let me just say this. The Most High doesn't force anybody to serve him. Yahusha doesn't force anybody to get saved. I don't know who these people thought that they were. And if you love Jesus so much, why would you take children away from their parents to be brought into slavery? These people didn't serve the Most High, they served the devil. Multitudes of Jews were sent to this island during the reign of King John II. These Jews, Judeos, as the Portuguese called them, are serious, reserved, and wealthy. So there you go, the description of the Hebrews being wealthy, serious, and reserved, holding most of the trade in their hands. And they also married with among themselves. They didn't marry outside their nation. Okay. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to establish themselves on the West African coast. They came first as merchants and secondly as conquerors and slavers. So that tells us, even though they say that the transatlantic slave trade started around 1500 AD, technically the Portuguese started the transatlantic slave trade on starting with San Tome. You do your own due diligence. Don't just take my word for it. So again, that was excerpts from the book Babylon to Timbuktu. If you are listening to this and you don't know Yahusha as your Savior, click the link in the description box. I tell you how to get saved. Have a good day.